Hello and welcome. This is Lisa Nichols again. I've created this shorter version of my blended learning Calibrate session just to hit the highlights for those who couldn't make it. In the tutorial, I covered the basics of blended learning, what it is and how it works. Take a minute to reflect on that information and consider some of the worries or concerns you might have had about using learner-centered blended learning. I hope by the end of this tutorial, some of those fears and worries will have subsided. In this follow-up tutorial, I want to discuss some of the more practical considerations of using learner-centered blended learning. How do you go about redesigning a class? And then we want to look at some of the challenges we can anticipate, and finally talk a bit about what help is available to you. The first thing you have to understand and work to embrace is that blended learning is about doing things differently as well as doing different things. It involves making a paradigm shift from a traditional teacher-centered approach to a learner-centered approach. We do that by examining our practices and our beliefs about how students learn and what motivates them. I encourage you to spend some time reflecting on your beliefs about good teaching and what that is and what that looks like. In order to adopt a new mindset about what constitutes best practice, we need to rethink the interrelationship between the act of teaching and the act of learning. Part of your challenge is to deconstruct your course and look at each piece to re-examine what you do and why you do it that way, and to ask if there's a better way to meet your learning objectives. Are you getting the results you want and intend? Are students learning to apply concepts rather than memorize facts? Our goal here is to optimize student engagement with you, each other, and the course material in order to increase learning and retention. If you pause here and take a minute, I imagine you can already think of one thing off the top of your head that you'd like to change or do differently. Start there and begin to build on that as you redesign your course structure and procedures. As you know, teaching and learning don't just happen. We have to plan it out. And doing that work up front helps us be successful, helps us feel more confident in what we are doing in the classroom and why. So let's take a closer look at planning. When it comes to planning, start with the end in mind. Let's look for a moment at some lesson planning documents you might use to organize all this information as you plan. You could work through a very detailed plan like this, and it's a great choice if you're new to blended learning. Everything is outlined and clearly structured. Rather than a day-to-day plan, you could also plan out units of instruction based on a particular concept or theme. This is one I found on Simmons' site, and I've adapted it to include some location information. This kind of bare-bones planning is also an option, especially if you've been doing team-based or flipped types of blended learning in your classes already. Really, you can structure your plan any way you choose, but I just can't say it enough. The more you plan up front, the fewer headaches you'll encounter later. And if this is totally unfamiliar to you, that's not a problem. Send me a time we can meet. I've done lots of these. You bring the content, I'll bring the organization. If you're starting to feel a little overwhelmed, let's talk about some strategies you can use to balance workload issues. When you examine the pieces of your course and start putting things together in a way that works for you, I want you to look closely at the work to be done and ask yourself, who should be doing that work? Because again, we don't want to just continue to do things the way we've always done them just because that's the way we've always done them. Take a moment to think about a class you are currently teaching or will teach next semester. What work could you hand off to your students right now so that they have more opportunities for discovery learning? Look for tasks that you could offload onto students in order to force them to grapple with the information to be learned. For example, do you give students notes, outlines, or a study guide? Is there any reason they can't create those for themselves? Before I move on to talking about some of the challenges we may face, we need to keep in mind that we are beginning with a new group of students in the fall, and this will be their only real experience, by and large, of pharmacy school and what pharmacy school is all about. Of course, there will be talk, but really, this is all they will know. That's not to say there won't be challenges. There will be. Balancing time and workload for both you and your students will be a challenge, especially in the beginning. Planning the time required to do both in and out of class activities will help keep you aware of how much time students spend working on your course. As for your own time, you will likely spend more time planning, so finding and offloading those tasks that students can and indeed should be doing for themselves will help you balance your own time and energy as well. Structuring activities and designing learning objects will be a challenge. If you've ever heard a teacher say, "Oh, I tried that once and it didn't work," chances are that whatever they tried was not well structured. Students don't know what you expect of them unless you spell it out clearly. You'll need to think through and be sure that you can clearly articulate what you want students to do and why, so that they can meet your expectations. Consistency will be a challenge. Planning will again help with this. Figure out how and where you will handle procedures like turning in work and routines like taking quizzes before the semester even begins. That way, students don't have to play guessing games about what is expected from you. We may face challenges from students in both passive and aggressive forms. Think about it. We'll be asking them to take on more work and to perform in new ways. Students who have been very successful by following the old rules may feel scared or insecure when we change them. They will need our support and guidance to make that transition, but they will make it if we are upfront and clear with them about why we are changing the way we do things and how those changes will benefit them. As a follow-up, I encourage you to read this oldie but goodie. It has some great advice for dealing with some of the challenges we may face as we make the leap to student-centered blended learning. Sometimes it's hard to ask for help, but things are so much easier when we do. Patrick and I are here to help in any way we can. I'm glad to sit down with you and plan your course, work on individual sessions or activities, using planning docs like the ones I just talked about or something entirely your own. I can help you find resources if you're not finding what you need. Short of doing the actual teaching, I'm glad to do whatever I can behind the scenes to support you, to make sure your course runs more smoothly. My goal is to save you time and frustration. And Patrick shares that goal. He is available to help with all those technical aspects of blended learning. Just think of him like a movie director. You are the writer, sometimes the actor. He is the director and the producer. If you bring the script, Patrick can handle the rest. I hope that this has been informative and that you come away feeling better about making this leap into the new curriculum. There are so many possibilities and opportunities to improve student learning, and you have a lot of support here as you do that. I encourage you to set up an appointment with me or with Patrick and to let us help you get started now, especially if you're teaching PY1s that first fall. Use us. We're here for you. Thank you for your attention. I'll talk to you soon.